Okay, so hello everyone. Today we're here to deconstruct white saviorism within the development field and international development. So you're joining us today. We are the Oxford Development Consultancy. We are a student-run consultancy at the University of Oxford, providing pro bono research and consulting services to non-governmental organisations, development and microfinance institutions. The ODC Symposium is our inaugural initiative to facilitate important conversations on international development by reaching beyond the Oxford student body. We've got an exciting 4-week programme, including discussion panels, talks and networking events. And today we've got 3 contributors. We're going to start with some introductions from the speakers who are going to talk briefly about their experiences in international development and on the topic at hand before a Q&A led discussion. And as I said, please, we'd love to field some questions in the chat box. So to begin, contributing today, we've got Emmanuel Ava, we've got Themrise Khan, and we've got Angela Bruce Rayburn. So Emmanuel is head of Right for Education Foundation. It's really great to have him here today. The foundation takes great care to identify digital channels and technologies and connect people and the ideas across sub-Sahara Africa, and the network provides resources for self-empowerment through knowledge and discussion. And it's really great to have him here today. We're hoping he's going to talk about the organization's work and how they navigate some of the dynamics that we're going to be discussing. He has extensive experience in the NGO sector, which we're hopefully going to hear about soon. Secondly, we've got Themrise Khan, who's an independent development professional and researcher with over 25 years of experience. She's a prolific writer and has worked in NGOs and civil society in Pakistan, Canada, and South Asia, and has a number of publications. Unfortunately, she can't join us live today, but we have organized a pre-recorded conversation, which we're going to show in just a second. And finally, we have Angela, who is joining us from America. She's the founder and principal of Diversity Dev LLC, which supports international development organizations to start conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And she'll be joining us in just one moment. So to start, I would love it if Emmanuel would begin by introducing himself.
Hello, good day to everyone. This is Emmanuel from Right for Education. And as you all know, Right for Education, we are the largest African independent online destination where we are able to educate people that patronize our platforms. And so far as Right for Education, we have been able to give value to those that come online to be able to access our materials as well too. And that's Right for Education. We've been able to share ideas. We've been able to let people know the importance of sharing ideas and then helping each other to develop, to emancipate, to get more knowledge in every field that they find themselves. We believe at Right for Education, it is a place that one needs to be able to express him or herself, to be able to have knowledge, to be able to develop him or herself in every field of endeavor that one finds itself. And at Right for Education, we believe that we need to, working in Africa, we've been able to partner the Africans. We've been able to partner Africans in their activities as well. So culturally, in every area of life, we are there. So we believe that when individuals are able to know what pertains to their daily activities, it will empower them to be able to live effectively, to be able to develop, to be able to improve upon every place that they find themselves. That is what Right for Education we are doing, to be able to educate our audience, to be able to educate citizens, to be able to empower themselves, to share ideas, to improve upon themselves. So basically, Right for Education, this is what we have been doing. And at Right for Education, Our online platforms are there. On Facebook, we have Right for Education Africa. So when you go on our page, we have ideas. There are various articles that we write there where we have seasoned and experts authors that writes on various issues that pertains to life as well. So basically, Rights for Education, that is what we are doing in Africa, and we are giving value to Africans. We are helping Africans in their daily activities as well. And I believe that is great to be part of this conversation today to help us all. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And I think that feeds perfectly into the remarks that Themrise makes. So I will show that now.
I think international development itself is white saviorism. Because if you look at the trajectory and the history of it, it's basically the white global north going into the non-white global south. So the idea of white saviorism, I think, is ingrained in the idea of international development. And my argument has always been that international development is not altruistic. Aid is not altruistic, it's very political. And so whoever goes in to countries that, let's say, require assistance, quote unquote, they don't go in with an attitude to let's help them. A lot of them go in with the attitude of what can we get out of this? And I think the whole idea of consultancies, international development consultancies from the north is very much rooted in this as well. So I have been an international development consultant for close to over 20 years now. But most of my life, I've been one from the South and rooted in the South. Yet I am never seen, and I never have been seen as part of the overall international development consultancy sort of group, even though I specialize in exactly the same subjects that everybody else claims to be specialists in or experts in. So why is that? I've also lived and worked in the North. But for some reason, I was still not considered a consultant as equal to everybody who belonged to the North, regardless of the fact that I was bringing in exactly the type of experience that everybody claimed that they needed and they wanted for their programming. So why is that? Number one, I mean, that's something I think for everybody who's looking to make a career, a consulting career in this field, needs to first think about. What makes you so special? A. B, international development is international. It's not just Northern. So we're not just talking about people from the North. We're talking about people from all over the world, everywhere. I mean, I have seen constantly on social media and other colleagues of mine, one of the biggest issues is that whenever we bid for international consultancies that are put out by the large global multilaterals, we always lose out if we belong to the global South. Never the fact that we actually have the expertise that is probably required. And we always lose out people from the global North. I mean, I've experienced this personally myself several times at an individual level and at a consortium level, for instance, let's say. So that, I think, puts the whole idea of international development consulting as a white saviorism issue itself. And I think that's something all of you should be thinking about. Why you? And what difference will you make? Because at this point in time, I think that's what everybody's thinking. Everybody's thinking, what difference am I going to make if I come into this sector? That's not the point. This is not a sector about you. This is a sector that is very global in its reach. So I think I'll stop there for now. But I think the whole idea of consulting as being an aspect of white saviorism, which is exactly what international development is, I think should be the starting point.
So I'd love to hear your thoughts then on what opportunities the recent global changes may have brought about for countries to step maybe away from international aid, large donors, and to develop kind of more self-sufficiency.
Sure. I mean, this has been one of my arguments for a while now, is that I think the rest of us outside the North have failed so far in developing more sufficient means of revenue generation for our own development. And I think that's a contested issue amongst many countries in the global South. And there's absolutely no shame in admitting it, that we haven't been able to be successful in generating our own forms of development. But I think accepting that failure is the first way forward. And there are many ways that our countries can. I mean, I have suggested in previous articles as well that we have taxation, we have local infrastructure revenue generation, we've got our diaspora overseas, we've got a lot of fiscal reform initiatives that can actually feed into our own budgets, and that can increase the revenue that we need so that we don't have to be dependent on other countries for aid. I don't think aid will ever end. That's not realistic either, but I think the levels of aid and the control that aid has, those have to be reduced substantially. And I think these are ways that countries can be self-sufficient. But that's the biggest challenge right now, because a lot of countries are very non-committal to these sort of efforts. Or there are a lot of internal issues, corruption, mismanagement, political instability that avoid these countries from actually generating their own development and their own wealth. So it's a long way to go, but the idea that the aid industry holds these as reasons to keep giving aid is not correct either. I think that attitude has to change from the global North side. That's why, in my opinion, things like the aid cuts that a lot of countries are now doing is actually a good thing. Because it means, I know everybody from those countries is, raising a big fuss that people will die of hunger if we cut aid. And I think that's going a bit too far. I think it's a good thing for us because it will jolt us into realization that we can't always be dependent on aid. And unfortunately, people in the global North don't see it that way. I've had a lot of people in the global North, reminisce about the fact that, okay, so what are we going to do now if our jobs are gone in the INGO sector? And in fact, that was a question that was raised in one of the UK committees as well. What about the UK jobs? They're like, that's not the point. This money is not there to keep you employed. It's there for a different purpose, right? And hello to consultants as well, or would-be consultants. This money is not to keep you employed. This money is for something completely different, right? So I think absolutely, I think COVID has changed the bar, and it hasn't in some ways as well. I think because of the massive economic slowdown globally, a lot of countries don't have a choice but to cut, right? But at the same time, a lot of countries don't have enough resources to pour into things like public health, which is desperately needed. So that's why you need to redirect international aid. And I think that's really the crux of aid. I think that's where aid should come in times like this, when there is a massive global inequity, and it needs to be filled globally as well. Rather than us doing, ad hoc interventions, which at the end of the day have no meaning. So I definitely think there's an opportunity. I don't know how many countries, both in the North and in the South, will avail of it. I think that remains to be seen. But I definitely think there needs to be a shift away from this attitude that if we don't spend money in poor countries, they will die.
Can I raise a question here? Am I allowed to speak?
Oh, of course, yes.
Oh, it's Dr. Susie Duttenberg-Doyle from Right for Education. I think I agree with many things you say. I would like to change one word, which is the global North. I don't think it's the global North. I think it's large institutions who run it. And they're funded in a phenomenal way, and it's like an insider club. And I'm from the global North, and I run the largest social media platform with Emmanuel, who just introduced it. And we are outside this club, and I'm constantly suggesting things like we have possibly the largest on the ground in real-time data on the continent. People like the UN have huge data, but it's normally top down and we are bottom up. And we know a lot of things that go wrong in Africa in the aid sector, but it's very obvious nobody who is running any of these organizations is at all interested to get feedback from the ground. It's completely clear. And so I'm from the global north, but I'm definitely also an outsider like yourself. And what you observe, I observe too. So I think it's more not north-south, or it's large organizations, and it's definitely a political. It's definitely a political playground. And if you get any grant, then you definitely, whoever gives you the grant, you definitely know which tune you have to dance to.
Really. Thank you for that input. That is very fascinating. And yes, for many of the audience here, this is Dr. Susie, who's calling in today, who works with the manual. So I will just finish the last of Themrise's remarks, and then we can get into some of the discussion. And I'd also just like to point out, Angela has joined us now. Thank you so much for joining us. We'll be moving on to the discussion in just 1 second. That's very interesting for everyone to hear out in the audience. A reminder that in week 4, we are going to have a discussion on the future of UK international development. So this fits perfectly in. I'm sure that's going to bring in a lot of thoughts and questions for that later panel. But thank you so much for your time. This has been really thought-provoking, and I'm sure a lot of our audience will be thinking over a lot of these topics as well. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Myra. It was really good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and all the best to you and everybody else in the audience. This has to be a collaborative effort.
Yeah,
okay.
Certainly true.
Yes, perfect timing there with the end of Themrise's remarks. So I'd like to encourage and invite Angela to join us in the conversation now. I introduced her earlier, but please feel free to introduce yourself again. And after Angela's remarks, we'd like to invite the panel members to talk about their experiences with white saviorism and the term decolonization within the development field to kick things up. So Angela, please feel free to join us.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Bruce Rayburn, and I live in the US. I am a native of the island of Trinidad and Tobago. I grew up in New York, and I came to development by way of Haiti, actually, in the post-earthquake environment. And it's the place where I realized that nowhere on earth is this notion of white saviorism and this idea that organizations, as Dr. Susie just said, and as Themrise just talked about, nowhere is this collision of white saviors and global institutions and multilateral institutions more obvious than in a place like Haiti, where with already very specific problems and challenges in a country like this, and then to have an earthquake and other natural disasters really exacerbate already complicated circumstances in a country like this. And then you have the international community that sort of descend upon a country like Haiti. And when I say descend, I use the word descend because I want to conjure up the image of what that means. That your island is here one day, hit by an earthquake, and then everyone arrives in your country within the weeks to follow the earthquake under the guise of international development. We're coming to help you. We're coming to bring water. We're coming to alleviate humanitarian suffering. We're coming to figure out what to do about housing. We're coming to do all these things under the guise of the international community. But what do you really bring when you strip away all of this? There's a lot of, you bring also a lot of baggage and a lot of other problems that are not often dealt with at the front end, but that Haitian people are left to deal with when you leave. So my understanding of what international development is, and just to piggyback on what Themrise is saying, is just this idea that we have created a culture of dependency. And then now that we've created a culture of dependency, we say, oh, we can't leave because we need to build capacity, because these people have no capacity. So then we end up creating an entire program around building the capacity. And then we stay in a perpetual state of capacity building. Organizations never get to a point where they say, oh, we've built enough capacity. It's time for us to go. That's just never a thing. It's just more capacity upon capacity upon more capacity, right? And so I think that in a place like Haiti, looking at it in the post-earthquake environment, you realize that there were so many opportunities for the international community to come in and do work differently and to really change the framework and the mindset. But that's not what happened. And so when you see Haiti in the news today, you get a lot of people saying, well, oh my gosh, we're always helping this country. We're always doing something in this country. I'm not sure helping is the way I would describe it. I'm not sure that a lot of Haitian people would describe it that way either. And so that's the problem with international development and white saviorism and this dependency culture that we've created for decades. And so when Themrise says that, that we need to pull back from that and start thinking about how to do things more in these parts of the world where people need to be doing it themselves. But the reality is that we've created systems that have made it impossible for them to do it themselves. We have bad trade policy, all these things that really impact us. So I think that the conversation is complex and wide and far-reaching. And I think also one more thing, something that Dr. Susie said, yeah, it's organizations in the global north. It's organizations, yes. But 80% of all the organizations international organizations working on on global health issues, 80% of them can be found in 3 countries, the UK, the US, and Switzerland.
I agree with that, exactly.
Yes.
It's incredible. Yeah. They all live next to each other and talk to each other. And they live in the most expensive places in the world, and they talk about helping the poor.
Absolutely, 80%. And then of that 80%, about 90% of them, of the nationals who work in those organizations, come from those 3 countries as well. And of that 90%, about another 95% have attended all the elite schools in these countries. So we're talking about the Oxfords, the Cambridges, the Harvards, it's just it's a perpetuating cycle. So I will stop there.
Thank you. And I'd love to bring Emmanuel in just here. He talked a little bit about the work that Right for Education does at the beginning of the talk, but I'd love for you to be able to speak a bit more on this and what the organization does and how you navigate some of these dynamics.
Great. So like my fellow participants have indicated earlier on, white saviorism has actually been an issue that have been discussed extensively. And I believe when you come to Africa, where it is a developing nation, most of African countries are developing nations. So there is a high expectation on the developed countries to bring aids to support the continent. However, as time is going, there is an emancipation, or there is an enlightenment going on in Africa, where Africans are now beginning to believe that they have to empower themselves. They need to build the capacity themselves, and then they need to be sustainable themselves. And as indicated, as well too, with the advent of COVID, as well too, with these fundings that are not coming again, it has now opened the eyes of the Africans or these developing countries to now want to find ways in which they can generate funds themselves in their development, where they want to rely locally to support their development as well too. So basically that is about the white saviorism and then development in the international context as well too. So that's why I taught as well on that.
Great, thank you so much for that. Yes, really ties into some of the themes that Themrise was exploring. So I'd love also to then kind of shift a bit more specifically to some of the experiences specifically towards the role of international development consultants. Obviously, we're a student-run consultancy group here, so I'd love for any of the speakers to be able to talk a bit more on if they've got experience with the consultancy as a role itself, or if there's any other thoughts I'd like to join in. Angela, I see you've got your camera on. Please feel free to speak.
I guess I would ask a question first. Is, when we talk about international development consultants, this notion that we are experts, it's very disconcerting to be the expert, especially when we're the experts that are elevated. At the same time, we are minimizing the expertise in some countries in the global South. So we work in this paradox of doing good on one hand, while at the same time, what exactly are we doing good at? And I think that international consultancy, this idea, Themrise was referring to it, where I have been in situations where I didn't get selected for things in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, a part of the world that I think I know better than the average person, in London or in New York, right? And so there's this idea that when you are, that people in the global South, for lack of a better terminology, are the expertise is just not valued at the same level. It's just the way it is. And you can see that playing out when you look at who are the types of leaders in international development. If you look across the organizations, when you see these consultants, who are they? Oftentimes they're those educated in those great schools. I'm not knocking these schools, but what I'm saying is that, I don't want Oxford people to be mad at me. But I attended an all-Black college in the US, what they refer to as an HBCU. And so the level of what is considered to be valuable at an HBCU is very different than what is accorded to Harvard and Yale, even though we may be equally as intelligent, right? So, or as educated. So I think that the issue of international consulting, especially when it comes to the fact that the expertise is elevated when people come from the global North over people in the global South, is super problematic. Because what you're talking about is people coming from outside with ideas and plans and metrics and statistics and strategies to tell you about your own context. And they have an outsized role because they have the money and the resources. And that's a problem. And that is something that is absolutely needs to change.
And I encourage everyone in the audience, we suggested some of the readings from Angela and Themrise in our information booklet. And beyond the ones that were suggested, please feel free just to Google their names. There's lots of great articles that they've both written, which are really, really informative. And also I encourage you to check out the work that Right for Education does, their platform and their Facebook page. They're really, really great work going on there. So now I think it might be time to move towards any audience questions. So we really encourage people to message in the chat if you've got any questions about what's been brought up. For those who are interested in pursuing a career within development and development consultancy, we'd really love to hear your thoughts and opinions. Has this changed your view on development? Has it changed maybe what you thought your role might be within development and roles that you might pursue? So please feel free to message in the chat. And while we wait for some of those messages to come through, I'd love to jump back to Emmanuel. And you mentioned that it's white saviorism is something that you personally have experienced working in the field. I'd love you to talk a bit more on this, please, because I think this brings a really valuable insight to our audience. I know personally for me, as someone based in the UK, it'd be really, really enlightening.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Like Angela said, with the white saviorism, where it is perceived that those from the global north or those that study from the high institutions are being valued more than those from a lower context. That is what have to be really looked at, where it wouldn't sound very offensive to those from the lower parts or those from the global south, that those at the global north, they are coming to the global south to impose ideas on them, to impose things on them that they need to accept, whilst the context in which the global south is far different. And it is important for us to understand the global south, the context of the global south, how things are, how developments are. So if you're able to understand how the global south operates, then we can be able to understand, and in coming with developments, we will be able to effectively develop, because you'll be able to understand how the context is, how or what are some of the practical things that is being needed at the global south. So Right for Education coming on board, what basically we are doing is, how do we empower the global south? How do we let them know that these basic things is important for growth? How do you let them know that you need to have this kind of knowledge to be able to facilitate or to be able to navigate every situation you find yourself? So experience in the international development with Right for Education, that is what basically we put on board, that we will need to educate our audience. We need to let Africans know that ABC is important towards the growth of the continent, towards the growth of the global south. And when you're able to empower yourself, you'll be able to express, you'll be able to relate with people that come from the global north as well, and with their activities as well, towards the development of the global south as well. So basically, that is about my thoughts on that as well too.
Great. And do you mind if I dive a little deeper here? And I'd love to hear about the organization's work, and do you have any interaction with maybe funders from the global north or other organizations coming in? Have you had any support on the work that you're doing specifically on the ground? I'd love to hear about your experience there.
Okay, thank you. So basically, Right for Education is a non-governmental organization. Currently, we are operating, and we have few fundings, and now we are looking forward to have more donor partners to support us to be able to educate more people in Africa as well too. So basically, that is what we are doing, and it is something that at Right for Education we believe that is a passion that we need to have. Even though currently there are no much funding for that, we will still want to educate our audience. We still want to let them know. And interestingly, you have some partners as well coming on board, and it's going to be good to be able to expand our scope. And currently we have almost 7 million followers as well too. So it's a very good opportunity to be able to let Africans know, let our audience as well know that any field of endeavor they find themselves, and our articles that basically we put on board to it falls on, we have articles in health, business, politics, government, and law. So it really helps as well. So basically, that is what we're doing at Right for Education.
Brilliant. And we've had a few audience questions coming in, which I'd like to pose to the panel. So firstly, we've got one from Eris. Apologies if I've butchered your name there. But the question is, after reading the articles discussing the concept of decolonization and the problems surrounding it in the development sector, a question that came to mind was the idea of redistributing wealth. While the recipients of aid should of course be spearheaded the action, is it not important that the global north, who has financially benefited from the exploitation of the global south, give back? So that's a really great question, thank you. would any of the panel members like to start on this question? Angela.
Haha. So reparations, is that what we're talking about now? It's an interesting question. Absolutely. But the reality is, how is that going to work? It's the question. It's been the perennial question. People have been talking about what will France do as a country that has benefited in a way in Africa and the Caribbean. What is the responsibility? The UK, the entire Caribbean, that the UK has owned at one point, and parts of Africa as well, and other countries in the global north. So the question is, should they be looking at redistributing of wealth? Yeah, but the question, but in these countries, there's such debate around even the role of the colonization. In the UK, colonization is fraught with all kinds of complexities when people talk about it. The UK, I mean, I went to school in the UK, by the way. I didn't go to Oxford, but I went to Bradford.
Oh.
And I did. I have a graduate degree from Bradford. And in a place like Bradford, where, it's a very highly populated with many, ethnic minorities in Britain, just hearing their conversations about how does Britain talk about colonization? Is it written, so if you can't even speak about colonization, acknowledge what has been done historically to other parts of the world, then how is the conversation about redistribution of wealth going to happen? So we have just been unable to, and it's changing. I mean, this conversation is evolving, but the fact about the matter is there's not a whole bunch of people lined up willing to talk about redistributing wealth. And so it's a discussion that has to go through, I think, the acknowledgement that what Britain has done, among other things, in other parts of the world, and France and other countries in Europe and the US and all these countries, what has happened, what they've done to other parts of the world, has to be acknowledged and sort of be integrated into the way we think about it. And then the conversation around redistribution of wealth could happen. But in the way we are now, I don't see it as a conversation that's going, very far. That's just an observation from sitting where I sit.
Great, thank you so much for that. And then Emmanuel, if you have any thoughts, please feel free to speak up. If not, we've got plenty of other questions to get through.
Yeah, I think what Angela said is she's right. Every participant, the North is not ready to accept, and then the South is as well also trying to forget what has been done to them. So that meeting point is also not there. The North is not ready to accept that, okay, yes, what we've done to you, how we've colonized you, and what that we've taken away, we've not done right. And the South as well also, because of the pain in their heads, they are also not ready to listen to any discussion with regards to this colonization. And this has been an issue. And like Angela said as well too, it's going to be discussed extensively as well too.
Great, thank you so much. So we also have a question coming in from Grace, who says, do you think there is a way for people with an Oxford background / based in the UK to facilitate the transition of authority in the development in the development sector to those with experience on the ground? And again, either panel members, please feel free to speak up.
I guess, could you say the question again? I'm just curious. Yes. Is it in the chat?
Pardon?
Is it in the chat?
Oh, I don't know. I think it might be. I've handily been.
Yeah. Okay. It is in the chat. Okay. This question I get often when I speak at groups about what is the role of people in the global north? Like, like when you ask the question about whether or not you are going to have a development career, and then the question is, but am I suited for that? Am I the person that can go to, name whatever African country or whatever Caribbean island or whatever Latin American or Asian country, am I best suited to go and do this work when there are people on the ground that have better experiences than me? And so I often tell people there's a place for all of us, people in Oxford background person, to work in development, but you have to, I think, given what development has been and what it has done, does not allow you to be naive about development. So working in the sector means that you have to be better than you just can't be a person who comes in like, oh, I'm going to save the world. I'm going to save these brown people. I'm going to save these Black people from themselves, because obviously my Oxford education is what I need to bring to the table. So the conversation, there's a lot of, I think international development needs a certain kind of personality and a sort of a reflection on what it is exactly that this work is designed to do. And when Themrise is talking about we need to pull back, there's also that reality that we've done this for so long and we've had these marginal outcomes. So what needs to change in development? And I'm not saying that people, Oxford-based people, background people can't facilitate and can't work in the sector, but maybe their roles are going to be different in the next evolution. What we think the international development is going to look like as governments start pulling back money and funds and redistribution of money, the way it has been happening. Even look in the UK with DFID, right? I've been reading about lots of all the people come upset about DFID not giving money and the way things are changing. But as Themrise said, maybe this is an opportunity for different people to come into the sector.
Definitely. And I think that steps nicely on to our next question, which is what would be, this is from Nadia, what would be the ethical stepping stone to pursue in development career that you'd recommend? So maybe, again, maybe some careers advice we're asking from the panel, but is there an ethical stepping stone that can be taken? And yes, please, either speaker, feel free to chime in here.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So the ethical stepping stone basically is to understand your target group. You need to understand if the development is going to be based in Africa, you need to understand Africa. You need to know where you would want to put the development, or where you want to send your development, or what you want to go into. So if you're able to identify your target group, if you're able to identify your focus area, then you'll be able to develop on that. Then you'll be able to focus on that, understand their context, understand what is needed or what is expected of you coming on board as an international developer as well too.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So we've got one question coming in specifically for Angela, and it's questions from Siobhan asking, what should have been done in Haiti? You mentioned your experience working with Oxfam, so yes, please expand on that if you wouldn't mind.
I used to say when I went to Haiti that if I had a magic wand and I wanted to change things, I would have kicked out every NGO out of my country. That would have been my first order of business. As a government, I would have had them come back in as to register in my country. I would have charged them fees to come into the country to work. And I know everyone said things like, oh, no one will come if you charge fees. I don't think that's true, because I think that there were a lot of development organizations wanting to come to Haiti. I felt that the government was, of course, weakened by the earthquake, but that weakness also was was exacerbated, I think, by the sheer volume of participants on the floor, on the ground, the sheer volume of actors. There were thousands of organizations in Haiti after the earthquake. And so there was no ability for reflection on what needed to happen in an organized way. It was chaotic. And so I think if I had a magic wand and I was the president or of Haiti, the prime minister of Haiti at some point, I think that controlling the narrative, as well as controlling the presence of groups on the ground, needed to happen. And because that there was such a lack of control of that, it just spread into this moment where people, I would say this in my speaking, I would say people fell out of the bed in the morning in Texas or Arkansas or Nebraska, and they said, I'm going to Haiti. Or they might say something like, I had a dream and the Lord told me to go to Haiti. And when that is what is masquerading as development, right? When these kinds of actors are all participating along with the more formalized organizations and church groups and everyone descending on this country, on this small island that just suffered this massive, massive event without any order or anything in it, it just had this debilitating effect. So let me just give one more example. I was on the plane once going to Haiti, and I would often fly from DC through Miami to Port-au-Prince. And I was on the plane, and half of the plane, and it struck me because when I would go home to Trinidad, the plane is full of Trinidadians going home to Trinidad. And when I was on this plane, half of it was Haitian, almost half of it was Haitian, but the other half was filled with older white people, Americans. And they were all dressed in brightly colored T-shirts and hats, like yellow and reds, and just brightly colored. And it had, written on their shirts, the church that they may have come from, or the mission that they may have come from, or it might say something like Church of something, Nebraska, or something like that. And I was curious about them. So when the plane landed, and they all were clapping and they were praying, and it was all, and there's no disrespect for that or at all. But so we land, and so I go up to one of the ladies who was on the plane, and I said, what are you going to do here? And she said to me that she was from this church and this mission in some part of Nebraska or something. And she said, we're going to go build a school. And I said, really? I said, so are you, did you all connect with the government? How is that going to go? And she's like, no, we have some local friends and partners in this rural place, and we're going to go there and we're going to build a school. Now, just think about what that means. You have people are going to build a school. They have a limited amount of resources. They're going to start to build a school. It's going to be in the middle of nowhere. There's no discussion about sustainability. There's no discussion about who the teachers are going to be, where the books are going to come from, who's going to pay to continue the school. There's so many questions that I had. And this was happening in Haiti all across the board. And this was the way we were working in this country. And then you couple those groups with big NGOs and the UN and everyone just descending on this island, and then creating parallel economies, right? It just set people back. It had a lot of unintended consequences. So I know it's a long answer, but I want to explain the context that was the earthquake in say August of 2010, or June of 2010, 5-6 months after the earthquake. It was chaotic. It was a lot of actors, and the government, I don't think, had enough control. And I think it just made everything that much harder. And I think that is how, if I had a magic wand, that's what I would have done. Control those NGOs in a way that needed to be controlled.
Great, thank
Sorry
you.
for the
I
long
agree
answer.
with you. Can I just say here, I think NGOs always do things where they can take a photo of. So they build a school, but they never show the school being running. If you can't take a photo, they don't get involved because they put a photo onto whatever platform and say,
Right,
you start
exactly.
following.
Exactly. You build a school, but and you showed that, but you never showed the school running, because the complexities of running a school is a whole new ball game that those people have already gone back home, right? And they're, they're on to, doing the other things. And so it's just a difficult situation.
Well, I think it's exactly how Emmanuel got to work with Right, because we did build schools and they are running concerns, and it's a phenomenal amount of work to run a school. I mean, building one is really easy, but running it and finding teachers in the middle of nowhere who are qualified and whatever,
What
it is
language?
enormous.
Yeah,
It's enormous
sure.
amount of work, and in the end, the thing becomes very big because you start with 20 kids. We had in the end 1,000, and a whole community where everybody over 30 is illiterate and everybody under is literate. But I cannot tell you how much work there was in it. And Emmanuel should probably talk a little bit about helping there on the ground, because obviously I'm from the White North, but Emmanuel was our man in Africa, and he did. Maybe you should expand on what happened and how it worked out. Emmanuel?
Great. Thank you, Dr. Susie. Dr. Susie is a queen in Africa, and she's the founder of Right for Education as well, very respected as well in Africa. And like I said in my earlier submission as well too, it is very important that as development partners, we need to associate ourselves with the locals. We need to associate ourselves with the South. We need to understand their context. Like Angela was saying as well too, sometimes you development partners, you build a school, and then it comes to the running of the school. The school lacks various amenities, and it's become very frustrating operating the school. And like what Dr. Susie said, she actually built the school with a foundation in Ghana as well too, and the school has a huge number of population. So basically what the foundation did was to collaborate with the community to help in the administration and the management of the school. So we collaborate with the community, we collaborate with Ghana Education Service, and we let them know that, okay, we've come on board to be able to build this school, to be able to impart knowledge. So we need to further collaborate in effective management of the school. And another interesting thing that Right for Education does as well is that there is a constant monitoring of the school's activities and then how the school is performing as well too. So that is very important. It is not only about building the school, but it's about following up and then ensuring that things are going on as expected, that the value in which the school has been established or has been put there to give that value, they are giving that value. So basically, that is what's supposed to be done. There should be effective monitoring, there should be effective supervision, and there should be collaboration with the locals. Like I said, Dr. Susie is always with the locals, is always understanding their challenges, how Right for Education can come in to support, how we can come in to help as well. And that has really helped us well in developments in the country. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. And unfortunately, we're out of time at the moment. I wish we had much more time to talk on these topics. But I'd like to thank the speakers for their time. It's been really informative. The audience members are now invited to smaller breakout rooms so we can discuss these matters amongst ourselves. I'm sure people have a lot of things to say. There was a lot of conversation in the chat, which was fantastic. So I'd love to thank Angela, Emmanuel, and Themrise and Dr. Susie for chipping in as well. Thank you so much. Definitely encourage everyone to check out the writings of all of the panels and Right for Education. And also, I think this is a great plug to plug some of our future talks. We've got a talk on the 20th of May on the future of UK international development, and I hope we can continue some of these discussions questions. And also our next panel event is going to be on the struggles for democracy and development in Myanmar. It's going to be pre-recorded as the speaker is based in Myanmar, but please feel free to submit questions to our email address, which is info@oxforddevelopmentconsultancy.com. So again, thank you so much for our panel members. This has been really enlightening, and I'm sure it's given our audience a lot to think about. And so audience members, please feel free to stick around and we will saw you into breakout rooms. But thank you so much for your time, speakers. This has been really great.
Bye-bye.